Well, good evening to you. This is Scotty Sanders coming to you live. Thanks for joining me tonight. So if you don't know me, I am an international leadership consultant, and what I love to get to do and I'm deeply passionate about, and that is developing leaders. And in fact, my talk tonight will be talking about how to develop leaders. So it really just fits in perfectly of what I'm passionate about, what I love to get to do. And so I've spent a big portion of my time on pouring into leaders. And so my talk tonight about how to develop leaders, and really I'm going to hit on the philosophical side of that, kind of lay the foundation in which you do it. And so this is actually episode 54. So if you've missed some of my Facebook Lives in the past, you can go to certainly this page and watch them, but you can also go to scottysanders.com where they're put into a blog post along with the video. So check that out if you would. But I'm so glad that you joined me. And, you know, Mondays I always say you want to get off to a fast start on Mondays. I call it double Monday. If you can get things going fast on Mondays, it makes the rest of the week go well. So I hope you've had a great week thus far. So again, I want to talk to you about how do you develop leaders. And so this is part one. I have two parts. Tonight, I'll be sharing with you kind of the five kind of philosophical points, if you will, of why developing leaders is important. So to me, you know, the chief goal of a leader is to develop people, and great leaders develop other leaders, not just people, but people that are leaders that are now they're pouring into others. It's really the multiplication effect. So let's talk about the five things. I don't know if I even call them a point, but point one would be to this, how do you develop others? This philosophical aspect of it would be self-awareness is the first step to growth and development. And there's really two parts to this self-development. Part of it is your own self-awareness. You know, one of the things that I think we all are challenged with at times is our self-awareness. Like if we're leading a meeting, do we know how we're coming across in the meeting? Are people connecting with us? Are we coming across genuine? I find many times people kind of lack that self-awareness. They may not listen well, or they're not paying attention to, you know, body language that people are giving or how they come across with folks. So your self-awareness is very important in the development of other people. So let me just say a few things that you can do to improve your self-awareness. And it's also other part of this is how you can help people that you lead to improve on their self-awareness, okay? So you're working on your self-awareness, but you're also helping the people that you lead. So one of the tools I've found to be very helpful on self-awareness is personality traits. Going through these personality surveys. So I've done a number of those. One I'm really hot on right now is Culture Index. In fact, I became certified to use that. So I'm able to coach people through using Culture Index. And I can remember when I had my personality survey done with Culture Index, and I read through it and I had a person coaching me, I was in somewhat denial. It's like, gosh, I didn't realize these things about me. But it really helped me to become self-awareness. I'll be talking about one of my talks in the future strictly about personality surveys or tests that you can take. So I'll save that for another time. So that's the first one. Then learn to play to your strengths and play to other people's strengths. You know, you don't have to be great at everything, but you need to be really good at some things. So the key thing for leadership and development is you want to play to a person's strengths. Don't focus on so much what they don't do. Focus on what they can do well. And of course, you need to focus your attention on what you do well. So play to your strengths. And then identify blind spots, your blind spots. And we all have blind spots. So the people close to you, give them permission to speak into you. My wife can point out blind spots. My kids can point out blind spots. And people that are friends or peers of mine, I want to give them an opportunity to point out blind spots. So we need feedback to do that. And then you need to point out blind spots to the people that you are developing yourself. So again, philosophically, awareness is key to development. Here's the second one. Development hinges on trusted relationships. It's going to be a real challenge for you to be able to develop people when people don't trust you. Because in order for a person to grow, they have to be willing to change, and they have to be willing to make themselves a little bit vulnerable, but if they don't trust you, they're going to play it kind of close to the vest. They're not going to try to do something different. So really, trust is very, very important in doing this. What are some ways that you can show people that you trust them? I want you to think about that. What are some ways that you can do that? You may want to think about, giving them responsibility is a way that you show people that you trust them. Don't control, don't micromanage. Those are some ways that you can show people you trust them. If you give them a responsibility but you micromanage them, you're really not trusting them. So again, if you want to develop leaders, trust is very important in that relationship side of things. And even tell them that you trust them. Verbalize that to them. Say, listen, Jim, I trust you with this. I have all the confidence in the world you'll do a great job. Listen, what we think and what we put in our brain is important. So if you believe in them, it will make them believe in themselves. Trust can be transferred. And so if you want to develop people, do it from a trusting, not from a skeptical standpoint. Why do you at times don't trust people? So think about that. What are some things that cause you not to trust people? So identify those things, and maybe you can mitigate that with someone early on if you see them going down that path. That way you don't get to the place where you don't trust them. As leaders, we need to always work on how can we maintain trust with people, because if you want to develop people to be leaders, there needs to be trust. So again, I did a whole talk on this, so I'm going to take maybe 1 minute to remind you my talk on trust. And it boils down to, you go use the word trust as an acrostic or an acronym. The T is for time. Don't waste people's time. Show up on time. Start on time. Don't be late for things. The R is be responsible and have responsibility. The U is under promise and over deliver. If you're trying to develop someone and you're always making promises and you don't keep, they're not going to trust you. They're not going to follow a leader that cannot keep their promises. And the S is speak less and listen more. Don't do all the talking. And then the last T there is for transparency. So part of developing people is for you to be transparent and even share your weaknesses and share your failures. So developing people, a lot of that hinges on the trust relationship in order to develop leaders. So again, philosophically, self-awareness and building trust. Here's the third one. It's this. People grow best while they're in the game. It really is that OJT here, on the job training. There's some truth to that. Getting people to do something is a great way for them to grow. So learn to do that. Sorry about that. My phone was beeping. Learn to get people in the game. Get them in the game where they can start trying out some things. So think about this. What would that look like in your organization to get people to start practicing a little OJT? Now, a good little formula to follow, kind of an onboarding way, is that first, let them watch you, show them how to do it. Then they do it with you or with someone. Okay. Then they do it and you watch them do it, and then they go solo. So that's a good way to get them to do it. Some on-the-job training. Let them go ahead and get in the game. That's a great way for people to grow and to develop in their leadership when they do it as they learn. It's a learning experience to do that. Here's a fourth one. Asking questions help people to grow more than giving answers. This is one of those things. I like to solve problems and I like to really help people, but sometimes I'm not helping people by solving the problems, because I end up with more problems, they end up with less, and they don't become a leader. I may be helping them solve a problem, but I'm really not helping them to become a leader. And I've had to make that mental click in my mind. This may help them, but it won't help them to become a leader. So if I'm pouring into them a leader, I need to ask them questions. And let me just say, avoid the why questions, because why questions tend to put people a little bit on the defensive. You can ask, what went well? What were some takeaways? What would you do differently? What did you learn from this event? Asking good questions is so important. I'm reminded, and I don't know if I've got this story exactly right. I've heard it so many times and I've read it in books before. The famous CEO of IBM many years ago, he had a salesperson that missed $1 million. This is going back maybe to the 50s, where $1 million was a lot of money. He missed $1 million sale at a time where IBM really needed that sale. And so Tom Watson wanted to meet with this guy. So the guy, when he was coming into the meeting, he decided to go ahead and write out his letter of resignation. He plopped it on Tom Watson's desk. And Tom Watson, he asked him a question. He said, well, tell me what happened. And the guy was very thankful that Tom Watson asked him what happened, and he had an opportunity to share with him what happened. And so after he shared what happened, he gets up, the young man, he's heading to the door, and Tom Watson gets out of his chair and follows him to the door, and he hands him the letter of the resignation back. And he said, listen, I'm not accepting your resignation. This was a $1 million learning experience. You learned something from this. And so it reminds me also that learning is evaluated experience. So Tom Watson was smart enough. Listen, he already made the mistake. Learn from this, and then don't make that same mistake down the road. And I think that's just a great philosophical lesson on developing leaders. You got to allow leaders to make some mistakes and learn along the way. If they never make a mistake, they'll never try to do anything big. Listen, this guy may have made a mistake going for $1 million sale. So what if he had made $1,000 sale? He may have made that, but he missed out on having a chance for $1 million sale. So failure is just part of that. But evaluating it by asking when you ask good questions, it helps people to evaluate what they learn. Experience in learning, evaluated experience is. Love that one. So that's number 4. Important lesson. Just experience is not learning, but when you evaluate things, it is learning. Here's number 5. People must own their own development. There's some things your parents can't do for you, and there's some things you can't do for your kids if you're a parent. You can't make them learn. You can't learn from them. Same thing goes for leadership. You have to own your own development. All right, and let me just challenge you. If you are an aspiring leader and you want to develop others, you can't take people where you've not been. So you've got to be leading out and growing, okay? And I just want to encourage you and challenge you. At least 5 hours a week, an hour a day needs to be committed to learning. I try to do 2 hours a day on average, and some days I may do 1 and I do 3 the next day. But over a course of a week, it's at least 10 hours a week, at least 500 hours a year, and probably more than that, right? But you just want to be that committed learner. So you need to own your own development. I own my own development. No one needs to challenge me. I challenge myself. But when I challenge myself to grow, then I can then encourage others to grow as well. So how are you owning your own? And then what are some ways that you encourage others to own their development? Let me tell you some things that I do. One, I'm always willing, not in a bragging way, but willing to share with others things that I'm learning and reading. So I'm big about passing along maybe a blog article or a book that I read or a podcast I listened to, an article in a magazine or online. So I'm sharing the things that I'm learning. I speak from my overflow. And one of the things I try to do, I do a lot of speaking and I do a lot of writing. So I incorporate the things that I'm learning into my speaking and writing. That keeps me accountable. I'm thinking about another book project. So I'm already thinking about ideas that would go into that book. So it doesn't come from an empty well, but it comes from a well that's overflowing with things that I've learned from many, many, many years. So I want to own my development, and you want to encourage those that you lead to own their development. So those are the 5, and let's just say the philosophical aspects or concepts in developing leaders. So next week I'll be sharing with you in part 2, developing leaders, but it'll be super practical. And really, I came up with that based on a guy named Dave that used to be an executive leader with IBM. And he asked me the question several months ago, Scotty, what are some ways that you develop leaders? I'm going to give you the 5 things that I shared with this friend of mine that's a great leader and a great friend, Dave, on practical ways that you can develop leaders. Now listen, let me just ask you, if this helped you in this talk, please share this. Just hit the share button and pass it along. And listen, I hope you have a great rest of the week. I hope you'll press in leading yourself well. And when you lead yourself well, it gives you opportunities to lead others. So let's do that until next time we get together. So take care.